How much is that?
So, hi, and welcome to the Podcast Editors Mastermind, brought to you not live. We're recording on site at Podcast Movement 2021 in the HubSpot booth. And for the life of me, I can't come up with a good way to open the show, so here we are.
That is it.
Yeah. I'm Brian Edsminger. You can find me at Top Tier Audio. Joining me from the Mastermind is...
I'm Carrie Caulfield. Eric, you can find me at yayapodcasting.com.
And we have two special guests with us. One is Steve Stewart. The other is Mark Deal, both from the Podcast Editor Academy. So we just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about the value of a live conference. We've all come out of COVID over the last year. We've spent time doing virtual conferences and experiencing all the joy of that, or the not so much joy. So we're talking about live conferences. What's the value? So I'll just throw that out there. We'll start with Mark. Why do you come to a live conference? What's in it for you?
To re-engage with old friends such as you two. I haven't seen you in a year and a half, March 6th of 2020. And to be able to see you in person, it just, I think, reconnects that relationship, as well as meeting new people, and perhaps even some that you've met and engaged with online, because maybe I've spent a little bit more time on social media in the last year and a half because of something or other. And now these people that I have relationships with, I'm able to see them in person at a live event, and it makes it much deeper for me. I work with a number of people on some special projects that usually generate money, and I prefer to work with people that I've met in person.
So let's pause there for just a second, because you mentioned people. Who have you met that's been like, you're just going, hey, I'm really glad I met this person this year?
Person that I have met this year, honestly, I would have to look at my app, because one of the things I do is I text them, their name. Hey, this is Mark Deal. We spoke about the topic we spoke about, and then later in the evening, I go back through. I was like, there's a couple dozen. So I'll be honest, the names aren't jumping out at me right now, but I've got a few in my phone. Like, I need to follow up with this. I remember there's a Seth with Fireside. Okay. Seth, if you're listening to this, I'm definitely looking forward to following up with you. Now the couple of dozen or other people that I've reached out to, that we've had discussions with today. I'm like, I'll follow up with you. If I can't think of your name right off the top of my head, I can't remember. Sorry. That's what the app is good for.
And I think one of those relationships from a few years ago is actually you and Steve. Steve, do you mind? Right. I know you've told the story before, but do you mind telling a little bit about how that happened?
How Mark and I met?
Yeah.
We were on...
How I Met Your Mother.
I got off the plane on the way from Dallas-Fort Worth to the very first Podcast Movement, got on a shuttle back before Uber. And they had to go to the other gate, picked up some more people. These two guys get in, they're talking about podcasting. So immediately he's like, you're going to Podcast Movement. We're all like, yay, Podcast Movement. So I saw Mark a couple times in the hallways there, got to know him by name and by face. He was referred to as Tim Ferriss because he looked like Tim Ferriss at the time.
That's right. That's right, yeah.
And then he was also going to another conference that I attend very frequently shortly after that because he was interested in the speakers there. So just that second meeting was really the payoff where we got to know each other outside of one situation. And then from there, it'd been a friendship and then morphed into, hey, Mark's got this great idea. I think I should probably take him up on it.
Yeah. So it wasn't the first meeting. The first meeting starts the relationship, but it's like rekindling, seeing people in person over and over again. Like, we've got to do this thing.
Yeah.
And they're the first you think of, and there's a special opportunity. Like, I remember that person I've seen a couple times at live events.
And we talked a little bit about the value of meeting people. What about you, Steve? Why do you come to in-person conferences?
I used to come here to learn how to do things or do things better, the sessions. And I've graduated past many of that. If you were to ask me today, what sessions you're interested in, there's almost nothing new there. And it's almost more like I go to the sessions to see the people I already know and like and see them perform. So then now there's the expo area, which is where a lot of the booths are for the people who have products and services for here, it's for podcasters. And I get to talk with them as well to see if there's any kind of connection. But really, it's just to know what else is going in the industry. So now I'm learning more about the industry, not just about the art of podcasting. And of course, I don't podcast anymore, so I don't really have a need to learn much about podcasting. But for me personally now, I don't want to call myself a service provider, but we have this community for podcast editors. So I'm trying to connect this community with podcasters and maybe get some people some gigs. That's the big payoff I'm having this year with a booth and all this other stuff that I'm coordinating behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I have been really learning, and that surprised me because this wasn't my expectation, is in talking to podcasters and talking to service providers and just kind of doing the hallway track, which is basically not going to the sessions and, talking to people, is hearing what comes up over and over again that podcasters and the people serving them say they need. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I keep hearing over and over again are editors. Mm-hmm. Editors. Where do I find editors? And I'm like, I know where you can find
We have 2 great communities full of them.
Yeah. Right. So making those connections, I think, and it's not just about making the connections. It's also about hearing, like, as the industry grows, how are the needs of that industry changing, of our industry changing? So that was a surprising learning.
See, Carrie's definitely got the overarching view of what she should be doing, what we all should be doing here, and that's advancing the podcasting industry, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I hear you as far as like the connections. You mentioned that. You also mentioned that. I know I've met a couple of hosts that I don't think are a great fit for me, right? But I know some editors that I can say, well, I think you might be a great fit for example, Daniel. I thought one was a great fit for him. There's another person I met that I'm like, okay, well, at least I can make those connections. I thought that I was going to be coming to learn more about some of the marketing and some of the stuff that I'm not super strong in to help my clients, right? Not so much to grow my shows, but to help them with theirs. What I've discovered is that, like Steve, in some of these, I'm probably past what's being presented here, and I really need to go deeper, but still being able to be involved in the recording booth like what we're seeing here right now. I get to talk to a lot of podcasters, find out what they're doing, and just kind of see that kind of stuff. So it's been really, really a cool experience for me. And also, being from Nashville, I really couldn't not come.
No excuses.
Yeah, so we've been here for several days. Carrie, this is your first day here.
Yep.
What's the if you had like one thing that you would take away if the conference dropped today, what would be the biggest thing you think you'd take away? I'll start with you, Carrie.
I would take away that the number of podcast networks are growing.
Oh, yeah.
And again, they need editors. They need people that they can, and not just editors, but project managers, right? So they need a staff, and the people running the networks need to focus on the high value work. Not that editing is not high value, but what they're good at and what's going to make them money. And there's opportunity here for editors to grow.
So these are networks, not just people having shows in a group, but having a network providing services to the podcasts in their network.
Right. And that's almost like easy, steady work.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be steady.
And that's a totally different model from one where the host owns the show, right? If the network owns the show, that's different because the host can change and the show can continue, which is totally different. What about you, Mark? What would you take away as like the one big thing from this?
If I were to leave today,
yeah,
and again, we've got a couple more days, and who knows what's in store for us. But as of today, I've been working a lot with some of the companies that have exhibits here. And Steve and I are working on a cool special promotion for December. And so far, we've already racked every company we've talked to has said yes as far as giveaway for editors, because they now realize we're not like the people in the dark corners, like, oh, podcast editors, you are the people that make the good shows sound great. Yes, we want to be a part of that. What can we give to the podcast editing community? So every company I've talked to says, yes, sign us up for 5 instead of 1. So we're looking forward to taking all that love for editors and then paying it back to the community in December. And that's as of today. I'm excited what the next couple of days are going to bring.
Yeah. How about you, Steve?
What was the question? Because all I know is I heard a bunch of cool stuff Mark's going to do for me.
Yeah,
that I don't have to
one
deal
thing
with.
He's going to take away is all those things, right?
He's got it all covered. I don't have to do anything but show up.
So if the conference ended today, what's like the one thing that you go, man, this is the thing I'm happy to take away from it?
Well, my biggest goal for this conference, it was threefold. I actually wanted to help podcast movement because it's not easy throwing on a conference post-COVID, and right now at this time that you're recording, there's been a resurge in a Delta variant, and attendance is dropping because there's flights canceled, and then there's worries about the coronavirus. They're not making as much money as they used to, and they've got basic costs they got to cover. So I wanted to support them by doing something, so I sponsored a booth. But it made no sense to sponsor a booth for myself. I'm not looking for clients here. I've already got that covered with the other expo that I go to normally. So I thought, well, what about having a booth for the Podcast Editors Club on Facebook? promoting a Facebook group, meh. Where's the value in that?
Yeah.
So Mark and I have the Podcast Editor Academy. I thought, well, let's make the Academy sponsor the booth, and let's give the booth to the editors in our community to be able to softly pitch people who walk by their services, because you got Ask the Editor is a sign that we have back behind the booth there, and any podcaster who walks by can ask these people questions. Our editors that are manning the booth are the experts now, and it's a very easy introduction to a conversation. And if the editor does a really good job, answering the podcaster's question, maybe they start working together, coaching. Maybe they need someone to write show notes. Maybe they need an editor. Maybe they need a podcast manager. That relationship that started here today might actually pay off next year. It might pay off next month. But there have been connections I have made in the past at these conferences that have paid off usually a year later, just because that in-person meeting, the in-person conversation, you're a real person. You're not just somebody putting up a web page making yourself look good. You're actually a real person in front of them. So my takeaway is those relationships have already been going on. We've already made connections in the past 2 days here that would never have happened online in a Zoom call. Never.
Yeah, totally. Mark, did you have something?
As Steve's talking about this, it's not just are they getting some good leads, but also some of these new up and coming professional editors. It's a little bit of exhibitor judo, right? So Steve and I don't have to man the booth the entire time. People in our community do. We don't need to sell Academy memberships. We need to promote the editors themselves. So, but even the ones that, like, say every person they talk to, maybe it's not the best lead or the proper fit for their show, but they practice their quick service offering pitch many times in an hour. So when people are walking by, we've been showing them, like, hey, just don't sit behind a booth, but stand up in front of it. And we kind of set up our booth that way. And as people walk by, like, hey, you have any questions about editing? And some people are like, no, thanks. Now people are like, yeah, I've got this problem. And that starts a discussion about editing. And perhaps they become a lead. And some of the new up-and-coming editors, people that have been professionally editing for about a year, not each one of those has turned into a hot lead, or this is going to be my next client, but they have refined their pitch, as it were, over the course of 1 hour. So in 1 hour, they started from I don't like talking about myself as a podcast editor, and the edit of that hour is I know exactly how to approach a person, talk to a person, introduce them a podcast editor, and that I can help them. And that happens in 1 hour. It's like a hot spot for service offerings.
And if I could, I've got to give kudos to Carrie and She Podcast Live, because that community came up with an idea that we were trying to do a little bit when we were at She Podcast Live in 2019, but we were more promoting the Podcast Editors Conference at the time. But She Podcast also had the Coaching Corner, which featured a lot of editors for an hour at a time. And they were sitting there just answering questions. So we've kind of morphed that idea into what we're doing as well.
Yeah, Carrie, you were the inspiration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Break
Everybody needs to
into
do
a
what
Chicago
I say.
song. Yes.
Right?
I mean, I thought I was wearing your shirt, but it turns out I'm not.
And we've got
next time.
permission to use this idea, so we're going to run with it, and it's going to benefit. We're going to do this at She Podcast Live too, so it's going to come back to September 2021 in Phoenix. No, Phoenix,
Scottsdale.
I'll be there.
Scottsdale.
With
Yes,
the booth.
so will I.
Yes.
What's been amazing to me is just seeing these editors who I knew just a year ago or a couple of years ago, who were very nervous about pitching and talking to potential clients in these kind of consultation booths. Because I think She Podcast Live was 2018. So
2019.
those editors and just seeing the confidence, right? You see the growth. It's pretty amazing. So after that first hour, they're just off to the races. So, I would recommend anybody come to a conference and participate in this, fill up those booth slots, because it's amazing.
Yeah. And having been part of many conferences, mostly as an attendee, and recently just being involved in some of the way, I've seen so many times where somebody comes for the first year as an attendee, and they're nervous and they're shy and they don't talk to anybody. But then the next year they come out and they're just gangbusters. They've gotten to know the community somehow virtually. They connect on Twitter and things like that. And they always say, I wish I wasn't so shy the first time around. And, some of the things that we're doing here today, and then even just knowing someone who's doing these things, if we can just kind of break somebody out of their mold, whether they're an introvert or not, it's going to pay off by the second day, because they're going to be a little more interested in getting outside of their own shell and talking to people.
Plus,
And that's the key.
talking about what you love to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that is amazing in and of itself. Like,
And the beauty is it can happen in the hallways. It doesn't have to happen in expo floor or in
Right?
our booth
The
or in
hallway
a
track.
Yeah, the hallway track is so it's weird that we spend a lot of money to go talk to people in hallways.
Yeah.
yeah.
I probably could have done the entire conference without actually doing any sessions, and it would still be valuable to me, even if I don't get any business out of it. Because, like, the takeaway for me is just how much I love my people. I don't know how else to put that. I mean, I spent a couple hours walking around with Virginia on the first day, just making sure that she knew some people, right? Plus, I get to hang out with her a little bit, and then get to hang out with Michael. Michael Jerry got to speak for the Nashville podcasters meetup. And so just getting to see my people and some of them shine and some of them getting to talk to people and then say, hey, I think, you do really cool stuff. You do really cool stuff. Maybe there's nothing between you, but you at least need to know each other. Like, you're just cool people. And that for me has been okay, yes, I'm an introvert. Yes, I pretend that I don't actually like people, but as it turns out, I do like these people. And so that's been really good for me. I don't really have anything to follow that up with. I feel like I should, like a transition or something, because that's what a good host would do. But we're stuck here with me.
But I think you really I think we all feel that. A lot of us I really don't like people, but it turns out you just need to find the right people that you like. And for you found it here.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of very few other people that I would want to spend this amount of time with in an unstructured way. And for me, it's been extra special because my family also came and spent a couple days here. So I like daytime with my people and then evening time with my other people, which is like really, really cool. One of the things you guys mentioned was that whole building relationships and allowing people to shine and providing something with the booth that did that. I'm wondering if you were to think about, like, from a conference structure standpoint, is there a way to allow or even make space for more of that? What would you do if you were wanting to design that in?
I want to jump first. Can I jump first?
Yes, because I don't have
parties,
an answer to that.
And the biggest party of the year is tonight. They need to turn the volume down at parties, especially now with COVID going on and many people wearing masks. Don't make it so you have to shout at each other and then you can't read lips. So okay, I'm an old man. I know the person listening right now is like, Mark Deal's an old man. Sure, get off my lawn. The music's too loud. But seriously, turn the music down at the parties. Just have enough ambiance to where it's like at a speaking beats per minute and have cocktail tables and open bar. And
I am totally with you. I'm like, turn down the music because I don't get to talk to these people but like once or twice a year.
I vote for the chocolate fountain.
Chocolate fountain. This is my first podcast movement, so I can't really speak to like what I would want to see. I was at PodFest last year, podcast movement. I will say that there was a significant difference in my comfort level in meeting new people this time than there was at PodFest. Part of that was just because I was really at PodFest for a very short amount of time because I had to leave early, where I've got more time here. I had the evening before, the day before, then all the time at the booth. And then also just being forced to talk to people every time they come up to ask me about HubSpot, and I try and sign them up for a recording session. So I think having ways that people that are interested in meeting people can serve is definitely a value add for me. Steve, did you have anything besides the volume level? Or you had chocolate fountain. Chocolate fountain, yeah.
Fountain.
That's my answer.
How could I forget the chocolate fountain? I mean,
And don't judge me.
No. I mean, I can see where, from a sanitation standpoint, that might creep some people
Exactly.
out. But it's chocolate, and it's a place where people can talk. I like it.
Yeah, with Steve's chocolate fountain.
Just put it in my hotel room.
Everyone has a badge, so maybe if there was something on the badge to where, like a scavenger hunt, to where you had to find a number of badges that spell something, and you meet new people while you're doing that, to like spell something on a badge to force people out of their comfort zone and talk to somebody that maybe they wouldn't walk up to and talk because of the way they look or who else they're hanging out with. They're like, oh, but they've got the letter that I need to complete a word. There's all sorts of fun things you can do, but number one, turn the music down.
Well, I think, gosh, what was it? There was a conference, and it may have been Podcast Movement, like 2019 or 2018, where like there were prizes if you scanned so many QR
PodFest
codes.
does that every year. You go to each
Is it
booth.
PodFest that does that?
They sign your sheet, and then you put it into a raffle.
Right. And so people are going around like, can I scan you? And of course, what a way to like make friends with people.
And that's great for the booths because you pay for a booth for walking traffic. How do you prove walking traffic? Well, if people actually have to come through and scan to say, I was here at this booth, then
And
that
then they
helps
give you stickers.
Chris to say, yeah, my booth booth sales at my events get traffic.
Yeah. So
I think continuing in the vein of the one thing, because that's been my thing today, is just one thing, because we've got like 5 minutes left. If you could sit down with Jared and Dan, for those listening, they're the organizers of the conference. I've been talking all day. And you could just say like one thing to them about the conference. What would you share? We'll start with Carrie.
go back to Philadelphia, please. I don't want to fly anymore.
See, I disagree, but that's fine. How about you?
I think I would thank them because I think podcasting has grown up a lot since 2014. And I think a lot of that is because of podcast movement. We see Apple, we see Google, we see the big companies come out, show up and throw their marketing dollars at these fabulous booths. There's another conference here that looks kind of shabby compared to podcast movement.
Definitely.
And, definitely, right? We're not going to say the name of the conference. And I think podcasting has grown up in large part because of Dan and Jared podcast movement. So I would say thank you.
I hate to just repeat what he said, but that's really what I have told them. When I see Dan and Jared, I just thank them and let them know that I'm here to support them as well. And volunteering is a great way to get involved with all of this stuff. So if somebody's interested in attending but aren't sure about spending the money and stuff, it's going to cost you money to get here and stay here. But volunteering gets you a free ticket and gets you involved behind the scenes, and you get to have those meetings with people. And then the next year you come out and... So I'm making a 2-year commitment. Everybody's got to commit to 2 years in a row, otherwise it doesn't pay off.
Can I change my answer?
Yes.
What I would love to have is way more detailed technical tracks and perhaps some sort of podcast editors conference.
I want to change my answer.
The mini-con? Yeah.
Yeah. To go along with it, because I think it's just kind of diving deeper. And maybe that's what Evolutions is for. I don't know. But again, that's like in Los Angeles, and I don't like to fly. So.
Maybe if we could do that, but only if we had a Yaya after party.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Carrie's right.
Chocolate fountains.
That should have been my answer. Thank you. I'm now gonna imitate you and mimic you,
Whoever's
Carrie.
listening right now is like writing notes, and they keep scratching through because you keep changing your answers.
In the keynote today, yesterday morning, or today from Tom, it was yesterday morning. Sorry, anybody who's listening to this, it's after that fact.
Your Google's not broken.
Tom Webster from the Infinite Dial Edison Research, towards the end of his session, or his keynote, said, he was talking about shows and how long should your show be? It should be shorter than the one you just put out the last time. And he said all shows will benefit from editing. So go to sessions about editing. Well, if you look at the session list, there's almost none about editing. In fact, a couple of them that said they were about editing were not about editing. They were about constructing stories. So there's the storyline editing.
Different editing.
Not podcast editing. So there is a need for that. And yes, Carrie, we've got to do something about that.
And I would love to be able to do workshops, although I know that's really hard, but that's...
Well, maybe if you and I and we all get together, we can make the demand for them and they'll see the need.
They had podcast guest speed dating, so I think the ability to do podcast editing workshops is there.
We'll just have them rent us. Here's the idea. Everybody, we want you to write in your answers. We want you to, they'll give us tables. We'll bring our laptops. We'll bring headphones. We'll share with somebody. We'll instruct them how we do our thing.
So I'm going to go ahead and agree with Mark. This is my first podcast movement. I have really no other frame of reference. I'm going to go with just thank you. Thank you for taking the risk. Thank you for putting it in Nashville. It should be here every year. I'm sorry, Carrie.
Agreed.
Yeah. Because then Mark can drive up and Steve can drive over and I can just live here.
Well, so if anybody wants to come to my house and like watch my cats, then we can drive to Nashville. I can bring the whole family, so that would work for me.
Isn't that what the Podcast Editor Mastermind live stream is about? Watching your cats?
Well, yeah, but like the live stream comes with me, so I don't know how that can work. Or I could just bring the cats. So if there's an Airbnb that takes cats, we can do that.
And for those of you that are listening, if you're not part of the Podcast Editors Club or the Podcast Editor Academy, I would recommend that you go ahead and start that direction. Become part of Podcast Editors Club. If you're not part of the Academy, check it out. There's a ton of stuff, and some of these opportunities come to Academy members. For example, the Ask an Editor booth is promoting the Podcast Editor Academy, so a lot of the editors are going to be connected to that. And that's a great way for people like me who wouldn't ordinarily force themselves out of their comfort zones to put themselves in a place where maybe they don't know anybody, but everybody knows why they're there, so they can start a conversation. So I would encourage that. As we wrap it up, I just want to go around one more time and let everybody say who they were and where we should find them. We'll start with Steve and come back to me.
Okay, I'm Steve Stewart. I will only promote the Podcast Editor Academy at podcasteditoracademy.com.
I'm Mark Deal, and you can find me at the same website.
I was Carrie Caulfield Eric, but
Now who are you?
I don't know.
Okay.
No. Sorry. Carrie Caulfield Eric. You can find me at yayapodcasting.com. Don't forget to join the Podcast Editors Mastermind Facebook group to continue this conversation.
And I'm Brian Ensminger. You can find me at Podcast Editor Mastermind. You can find me at toptieraudio.com. And unable to join us today was Daniel Abendroth, who is at rothmedia.audio. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
So
how much is that?
Did you hit record?
No.